Where you start the story of this case, you can start at any number of different places, but I think probably the place to start is right here. Headline New York Times, an ex-student held in a death in Colorado escapes from a jail in Colorado, flees a week before trial. This is Ted Bundy was in jail in Denwood Springs, Colorado, standing trial for the murder of a nursing student out there. Her name was Karen Campbell, and he had once escaped from jail, and they caught him, and they brought him back, and they put him back in jail, and he escaped a second time. On New Year's Eve, December 31st, he escaped from the Pickton County Jail. By January the 2nd, he was watching the Rose Bowl up in Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. It was cold that year. He didn't like cold weather. He decided he needed to go south. Decided he wanted to go somewhere that was close to the water because he liked boats, and wanted to go somewhere that was close to a university because he felt like he could blend in a university situation. So he went to Tallahassee, Florida, Florida State University, and on January the 7th of 1978, he rented a room at the Oaks Apartments, which is just down the street from the Chi Omega sorority house. About a week later, headlines come out, an intruder into the Chi Omega sorority house had killed 2 FSU co-eds. And when the police arrived on the scene to investigate that, while they were responding to the scene, he was down the street at a place called Dunwoody, assaulting another young lady. And she was saved by the fact that her next-door neighbors heard the banging and beating coming through the wall, and they called her to see what was going on. He heard the phone ring and ran away. So this touched off probably one of the most intensive investigations that ever occurred in Tallahassee, and sparked media attention all over the United States. If you remember probably a lot of you don't remember, about that time, one of the networks was about to put on a movie about a murder in a sorority house. They canceled the movie as a result of this incident. On February the 6th, things were getting awfully hot in Tallahassee with all of the activity investigating the case. Bundy decided he was going to leave. So February the 6th, he stole a white van from the FSU Media Center, stole a tag, number 13D11300. I'll never forget that tag number. I don't know what the tag number is on my car that I drive, but I'll never forget that one. And he'd been supporting himself by stealing during all this time, and we were able to trace his movements by the use of stolen credit cards. So anyhow, he steals this van, and he heads east. On February the 7th, he buys gas for the van in Lake City. On February the 8th, he's in Jacksonville, and he goes to the Green Acre Sporting Goods store, and he buys a hunting knife. And he doesn't buy just any hunting knife. He buys a Buck General hunting knife, which is a huge knife that is configured like a Bowie knife. And this knife figures prominently in the eventual solution of the case and the conviction of Bundy. We never recovered the knife, but we recovered the price tag off of the knife in the van. Later that day, he goes to the Jeb Stuart Junior High School. Just as the school is letting out, and a little girl, about a 12, 14-year-old girl by the name of Leslie Parmenter, is walking home. Leslie Parmenter bears a striking resemblance to Kimberly Diane Leach. Size, hair color, hairstyle, even to the clothing she was wearing, she bore a striking resemblance to Kim. He stopped his vehicle in front of her, jumps out, and engages her in conversation. She feels very, very uncomfortable. Her father is a police detective at in the Jacksonville Police Department. So she knows there's something wrong. Bundy's wearing a blue coat, and he's wearing a name tag that says Richard Burton Fire Department. Just about this time, Leslie's brother drives up. Now, Leslie's brother is a steel worker, and he is about half a head taller than me, and he looks like he could go bear hunting with a switch. Okay? So he pulls up and he says, "What are you doing with my sister?" And Bundy looks around at him and says, "Nothing," jumps in the van and takes off. Danny Parmenter loads Leslie in the van and gives chase. And when I was preparing Danny to testify, I asked him, "Well, what were you going to do if you caught him?" And he said, "Do you really want to know?" And I said, "No, I don't guess I do. I won't ask that question on direct examination." But he got the tag, and they later identified the person who accosted her as Ted Bundy. Okay. Later that evening, Bundy checks into the Holiday Inn 2 miles west of Lake City Junior High. This is the night before Kim Leach goes missing. Next morning, he kidnaps her from Lake City Junior High. This is Lake City Junior High. That morning, it was cold and rainy. You heard the opening line, it was a dark and stormy night. Well, this was a cold and rainy day. And on duty, right about here at this school crossing, was a septuagenarian crossing guard by the name of Clinch Edenfield, who was kind of a local fixture there. He'd been there for years. And he watched the children as they walked across this path here. Frida Leach that morning took her daughter, Kim, her son Mike, and she dropped them off right here. And they walked across the pathway right here, the crossing. And that was the day, that afternoon, Kim was going to go with her mother to buy a dress, a ball gown, for the the Valentine ball. She'd been elected to the Valentine Queen's Court, and she was really looking forward. They'd already picked out the dress, and they were going to, that afternoon, to buy that dress. Kim goes to the central classroom building, which is right here, to homeroom. And when homeroom ends, she forgets her pocketbook. She gets up and walks out of homeroom, leaving her pocketbook. And she goes to gym, or she goes to physical education. But physical education is being held here in the auditorium because it's raining, okay? So, school teacher, her homeroom teacher, notices the pocketbook. Whose pocketbook is this? Well, that's Kim Leach's pocketbook. And he says, "Does anybody know Kim Leach well enough to know where she is?" A young lady by the name of Tandy Bonner says, "I know where Kim is." And he gives Tandy a pass to go get Kim to come get her purse. So Tandy takes this pathway right here, walks out of the classroom building, walks around here, walks up a stairwell here into the auditorium, and gives a note to the phys ed teacher, gets Kim. They retrace those steps back into the Kim's homeroom class. She gets her pocketbook, walks out of the classroom, and falls off the face of the earth. The story picks up right back here with Clinch Edenfield. That morning, Clinch Edenfield noticed a man in a van, a white van, driving back and forth, peering intently at the children as they went into the school. He took particular notice of this, but the man wasn't doing anything illegal. He was just driving slow, and he was looking a little strange. So Edenfield goes off duty, and the next thing that happens, he later identifies the guy in the van as Ted Bundy. The next thing that happens is a gentleman by the name of Andy Anderson, who has done about 3 consecutive shifts at the Lake City Fire Department. He's a paramedic with the Lake City Fire Department. He's worked 3 consecutive shifts. He's going to work a fourth shift. And he asks his captain, he says, "Can I go home and change clothes? I take a shower and change clothes." And the captain says, "Okay, go ahead, take a shower, change clothes, get on back here." So Andy gets in his car, and he drives to his home down US 90, and he gets about here, and he's stopped because his car stopped in the middle of the road. There's a white van stopped right about here, blocking traffic. And Andy said, "I wonder what this is all about." And he sees a man dragging a girl by the arm. She doesn't look like she wants to go with him, and walking towards the van. He does not realize what he's seeing. He thinks it's a father whose daughter has gotten in trouble at school and he's taking her home to discipline her. He sees Bundy put her in the van, jog around, get in the driver's seat, and take off. And he follows him on. And, of course, he later identifies the girl as Ted Bundy, and the girl is Kim Leach, the man is Ted Bundy. The next thing that happens is right about here, near the Swanee River State Park, Bundy dumps the body of Kim Leach out of the van, hides it under a lean-to that's in the woods near a sinkhole, water-filled sinkhole, and continues on west, eats supper that night at the Chez Pierre restaurant. Then he gets rid of the van the next day. He's looking for new transportation. He has a confrontation with a deputy sheriff by the name of Keith Dawes, and is able to elude Dawes, and decides it's time for him to leave Tallahassee for good. The story hits the paper in Lake City, and this is the first I hear of it myself is on the 10th when the story hits the paper and it's on the radio. And I first thought out of my mind was well, she's either run away or she's been caught by one of these roam around the country, kill at random mass murderers, and we'll never know what's going to happen, what happened to her. I didn't use the term serial killer because I'd never heard the term serial killer. I'm not even sure that it had been invented yet. I was only partially right on the second presupposition or second guess as to what had happened to her. We were able to find out what happened to her eventually. The very next day, Ted Bundy hits the big time. He's put on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. On the 12th, he steals the orange Volkswagen that you've heard mentioned, leaves town, heads west. Then I've got the 14th, wrong date, 15th, he's arrested in Pensacola, Florida by police officer David Lee. And the van that Bundy is driving turns out to be a treasure trove of evidence. But we don't know who he is at this point because he gives a false name. He tells the authorities out there that his name is Kenneth Meisner. Now they immediately think that this guy might be involved in the Chi Omega murders for any number of different reasons. There's just something strange about him. They contact the Tallahassee authorities. The Tallahassee authorities send some officers out to work with the Pensacola Police Department on this thing. And there's a headline about Kenneth Meisner. The FSU track star getting himself arrested for loitering and prowling. And Kenneth Meisner calls the Pensacola Police Department and said, I don't know who it is you've got in jail, but it's not me. It's not Kenneth Meisner. Somebody's stolen my identification. So, next headline, imposter quizzed in co-ed killings. And Norm Chapman with the Pensacola Police Department was an investigator that worked on the case. And I remember at one time somebody asking him, well, why didn't you just, send his fingerprints off to the FBI to figure out who this was? And that was before all the automated systems that we've got. And the only place that you could actually do that back in that day and age was on TV or in the movies. And Norm said, that only work if he was on the top 10 most wanted list. Of course, he was on the top 10 most wanted list. Eventually, they talked him into telling his name. Mystery man tagged as #1 mass killer. See, mass killer. They still hadn't come up with the term serial killer at this point. Then Bundy is identified as the abductor the would-be abductor in Jacksonville. This is a composite picture that Danny and Leslie Parmenter did of the person that had accosted Kim. And this is a picture, this is Bundy's booking photograph from his arrest here in Pensacola. And some people have told me that there's no resemblance between those two pictures, but looks like the same person to me. Anyhow, they identify Bundy as the person who abducted or attempted to abduct Leslie Parmenter. Now, all this time, there's an investigation going on in Lake City that is completely unconnected to the Chi Omega murder case. And that's an investigation trying to find a little girl who has disappeared from school and who everybody believes is not somebody who would run away. So the Lake City Police Department is working on the case, trying to figure out what happened to her. Columbia County Sheriff's Office is working on the case, trying to figure out what happened to her. The Florida Highway Patrol is working on the case, trying to figure out what happened to her. Okay? So we've got 3 agencies, and it would be too long to explain to you why the Florida Highway Patrol was involved, but they were involved. We got 3 police agencies bumping elbows, working on what's basically a missing person case. And then an investigator from Tallahassee comes over to Lake City with a handful of stolen credit cards and says, would you help me look around and see if Bundy was used any of these credit cards in this area? And he got with the Highway Patrol, and the Highway Patrol went with him, and they went around and they found where Bundy had used credit cards in several places. So what do you do when you find out something like that? Immediately you make a press release, right? So the Highway Patrol makes a press release. Bundy link here, result of 1 + 1. Okay, adding clues. Okay, now how do you think it's made the Lake City Police Department, Columbia County Sheriff's Department feel? That and very simple sort of adding clues here. We got the Chi Omega murders here on January 15th. We got the Parmenter incident here on February the 8th. And halfway between, on February the 9th, we got the Leach abduction. 1 + 1 = 2. Very, very simple sort of a process. He was probably here. They went out. They had the hypothesis he'd gone through Lake City. They tested the hypothesis, and they proved it out true. Okay, now, at this point, the investigation ran off the track. Okay? Now, I was not involved in this at all, except peripherally. I was hooked into 2 or 3 different coffee clubs in the morning. I'd go drink coffee with different people in the morning, and I'd been drinking coffee with officers from different agencies, and I heard them complaining about each other, and then I heard them cussing each other, and then I heard them talking about beating each other up, and then I heard one of them start talking about shooting somebody. And so, this is not any way to run an airline, and it's certainly not any way to conduct an investigation. And that is why we ran off, why the investigation had run off a track, interagency rivalry. Okay? So what is the solution for interagency rivalry? What is the solution for interagency rivalry? Well, let's look at how do you deal with interagency rivalry? Let's, in the words of that great law enforcement officer, Ronald Reagan, there's no limit to what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. Okay? There's no limit to what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And that was the problem. Everybody's out there busting their behinds trying to work this case, and everybody thought everybody else was trying to hog the credit. So how do you deal with that? Well, the way we dealt with that was we formed a task force. And the purpose of the task force was to keep the agencies from bumping into each other, from redoing things that had already been done, from getting angry with each other over press releases, and coordinating the efforts, okay? And one of the main things that they did to try to keep the peace was to appoint a task force spokesperson, okay, spokesman. And the job of the task force spokesman was to talk to the press. Nobody else could talk to the press, okay? And the task force spokesman had better mention every daggum agency every time he spoke to the press. All right? And that way, everybody would be happy. So, you'll never guess who gets appointed task force spokesperson. All right? And I got appointed task force spokesperson for 2 basic reasons. They asked me, I had to explain why I was appointed task force spokesperson, and I gave them some kind of song and dance about expertise in matters of this nature. But there are 2 reasons that I was appointed task force spokesperson. Was number 1, nobody was mad at me yet. Okay? And number 2, I was dumb enough to accept. Okay? And that was probably one of the 2 worst decisions I made during the course of this investigation, was agreeing to be task force spokesperson. And that lasted about 3 or 4 days. And then I finally called a press conference, and I told them that there's going to be no damn more press releases. This is over with. We're not talking to the press again. And we managed to keep a pretty good press blackout on our investigation throughout the rest of the investigation, right up to the time that the body was discovered. Then things kind of came unwrapped. The lid kind of came off of it, and everybody started talking. The van had been recovered, and through good police work, the minute they got that van recovered, somebody said, "Look, there's something wrong with this van. This is not any normal stolen vehicle. We need to treat this with kid gloves." They immediately called the FDLE crime lab, and they treated it very, very gingerly from the get-go. Okay, and this also proved a treasure trove of evidence. Especially, you go to the back of the van, you open the doors, and here is a huge blood stain that has dirt and leaves thrown on it. Okay? Now, how could that be? Okay, here's a hypothesis. Bundy killed her in the back of this van. And when he got through killing her, he tried to do something to cover the blood up, and he immediately reached down and grabbed up some dirt and threw it over the blood to keep it from showing if anybody looked in the back of the van. The reason we hypothesize this was because Bundy had stopped at an agricultural inspection station while he was in Lake City to ask directions, and the ag inspector had shined a light in the back of his van. Made him very, very nervous. Says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, this is a van. You got to stop for agricultural inspection." So we figured that Bundy would not be driving through an agricultural inspection station with either a kidnapped girl, a dead body, or an obvious blood stain on a carpet in the back of a van. So all we got to do is test this soil here and have the soil expert tell us where this soil came from. Sent it off to the FDLE, and they had a guy who could do soil, and he said, "Yep." He said, "This comes from a river floodplain." Okay, now we lived in the Swanee Valley, and that was really not too helpful as far as information was concerned. Okay? While they were sending this off to the FDLE, another officer who should remain nameless took a handful of this soil and took it to a local soil expert in Lake City and said, "Can you tell us where this soil came from?" And the expert looked at it and he said, "This came from the Swanee River State Park." And he said, "Thank you." And I found out about this about 6 years ago, at another coffee club, just talking, and he told me about that, and I said, "What? Did you write a report about that?" And he said, "No, I didn't." "Should I have?" And I said, "Well, yeah, you should have," okay? Yeah, that would have been news we could have used at that time, okay? So we missed a golden opportunity there because an officer didn't write a report, okay? Didn't share information that he had and didn't realize, I don't guess, the significance of the information he had. So the expert who told us basically where the body was never testified at trial, and I never knew it until years later, decades later. Okay, anyhow. We are desperate to find the body. And you've heard of the X Games, the extreme games. We did an X investigation. We took some extreme measures. And here's just a few of the extreme measures we took. Somebody saw a man in a white van throwing what looked like some clothes into a dumpster in Suwannee County. So what do? We called out the National Guard and dug up the Suwannee County landfill looking for Kim Leach's clothing. Okay? Didn't work. Didn't find anything. Not that long ago, they had a case in Jacksonville, or South Georgia, I forget where they had a little girl go missing, and they excavated a landfill and found evidence of a homicide excavating that landfill. We were thinking right. We just weren't looking in the right direction. Hunting buzzards. Okay, we had buzzard patrol. We figured the body out in the woods. What happens when there's a body out in the woods? Buzzards start circling. So we got the FHP bear in the air, and it flew all over the Suwannee Valley area looking for circling buzzards. And every time they found a set of circling buzzards, we sent in a search party to look and see what we could find. And we found all kinds of dead things. Okay? We had one person reported seeing a buzzard with a piece of blue cloth wrapped around his neck. And I said, okay, Tim was wearing a blue jersey. If that blue cloth wrapped around that buzzard's neck is jersey material, that could tell us where her body is. So we called a buzzard expert at the University of Florida to figure out the range of buzzards, how far they flew away from the nest. And I said, okay, if that buzzard's got a piece of blue collar material, or blue jersey material around his neck, we can figure that Kim's body is within about a 2-mile radius of where we find the buzzard. All we got to do is get the buzzard, right? So somebody donated a pig, and we threw the pig out where the buzzard had been seen, and 2 highway patrolmen with shotguns waited in ambush for the buzzard to come back. And the buzzard never came back. Okay? Enlisted the military. I heard that the military had some super-duper spy equipment that they used in Vietnam for recovering MIAs, dead bodies. And wondered if we could get the military to come use that super-duper spy equipment to help us find the body. So, yeah, why don't we give it a try? Who's going to call them? Well, Bob, why don't you call them? Okay, I'll call them. So I called, there were 2 places in the United States that had this equipment that nobody was supposed to know about. So I called the first place, and they flat no. I called the second place, and I don't know if I was talking to a general or a colonel. I can't remember. And I explained to him what our problem was and what we wanted to do. And he said, do you have any idea how much that would cost? And I said, no, I don't have any idea how much that would cost. And he'd give me a number, and I don't remember just exactly what it was, but it had 6 zeros. And I said, okay, when can you start? And he said, well, there's something else problem here. He said, posse comitatus law. The U.S. military cannot be involved in law enforcement activities inside the United States. And I said, well, this ain't law enforcement, this is search and rescue. You can work on that, can't you? He said, well, yeah, we can. He said, well, we've got another problem. He said, this is all Navy airspace, and we can't fly in Navy airspace. We're not supposed to fly in Navy airspace. And I said, well, I guess that defeats it. He said, but it would be fun to sneak in under the Navy's radar and take these pictures without them knowing it and sneak back out. So they did. And so they snuck under the radar, and they were flying at treetop level, sonic boom level, taking pictures, rattling windows. And they took pictures of down US 90 almost to the Swanee River State Park when they gave up. Okay? Just a mile or 2 further, and they might have found a body. We found all kinds of bodies. Dead dogs, dead cows, dead deer. We didn't find Kim. Okay? Listen to psychics, and the less said about that, the better. Fingerprinted the media center van. We fingerprinted the van from top to bottom, and Doug Bear, our fingerprint expert, said there ain't no fingerprints there that can be lifted. And he said, it looks like somebody has wiped this van down very thoroughly. He says, but the FBI has got a new technology up there in Quantico that is got a laser. And they've been lifting fingerprints with this laser that you can't lift from anywhere else. And so why don't you call up? I don't know why I had to come make the calls. Why don't you call up there and talk to them? And so I called the FBI crime lab. I talked to them. I said, can you bring your laser down and laser this van? He said, no, we can't move the laser. It's too big. You got to bring it to us. And he said, we got another problem. Your van won't fit through the door, and it won't fit on the elevator. So, what do? Well, what do? You get an acetylene torch and cut the van up into pieces and put the pieces in a brown paper sack and carry it to the FBI crime lab and have them laser it. And you know how many fingerprints we found? None. And then we did some armchair psychological profiling. Asked the question, where would Bundy hide a body? And we took a map of the western United States and put a red dot on the map of the western United States, every place a body was recovered that was connected to Ted Bundy, and looked at the terrain around that body. So what kind of terrain is there around that body? And talked to some reporters from out west who knew something about the locations where the bodies were found, and got a little bit more of a description of where Bundy might have hidden a body, might have hid a body. And we came up with a sort of a profile of where Bundy would hide the body. It was going to be within 2 miles of an interstate highway. It was going to be in a wooded area. It was going to be near a body of water. It was going to be under a makeshift cover. And we were going to add in east of the ag inspection stations along the Swanee River. Okay, now, if we had had enough faith in this profile that we came up to follow it, we could have gotten in a car and driven to the body. Okay? All I had to do was just get in US 90, drive to right about here, and you see the sign that says Ag Inspection Station ahead, all trucks stop for inspection. Turn right on the first side road, look in this area, and this is where the body would have been found. Okay, but we were looking everywhere in the world except there. Well, how was the body eventually found? Very early in the investigation, we had search teams out in this area on another rainy day, and the search team found right about here a pile of cigarette butts. And the pile, very nondescript looking pile of cigarette butts. Well, what's a pile of cigarette butts? Well, there was a $5 bill lying on the ground near the pile of cigarette butts. So you do a little bit of if-then thinking. Well, the person that dumped those cigarette butts must have been in a hurry, or they'd have sure not dropped that $5 bill. A person dumping cigarette butts after committing a murder is someone who'd be in a hurry. Maybe that was Ted Bundy who dumped the cigarette butts, and maybe we can get fingerprints off those cigarette butts. So why don't we scoop these cigarette butts up and send them to the crime lab, along with everything else that we found in the woods, okay? And all kinds of stuff was being sent to the crime lab. We just inundated the crime lab with everything. And once we sent them a daggum dirty diaper that was found on the side of the road, and they said, don't send that stuff anymore. Okay? And so we sent off the cigarette butts, but there was a problem with the packaging of the cigarette butts. And the problem was this: it was raining, it was wet. The cigarette butts were wet. Put the cigarette butts in a plastic bag. Okay, you don't put wet evidence in a plastic bag. You take the wet evidence and you let it dry out, and you put it in a brown paper sack and send it in. By the time they got around to examining the cigarette butts, Doug Barra, the fingerprint examiner, by the time he got around to examining the cigarette butts, they had mildewed. Okay? And there was no way that he could possibly raise fingerprints off of those. But he said, I think I can do something else with them. So he took the cigarette butts from the on the side of the road there. And I don't remember whether it was the cigarette butts from the white van or the cigarette butts from the orange Volkswagen, and he's laid them side by side. And he looked at them. And he said, looks to me like the same person smoked both of these piles of cigarette butts. So he called us, and he said, this is an investigative lead. This is nothing I can go to court and testify about. But I believe Ted Bundy smoked that pile of cigarette butts. And if you will go back to that area and look again, you should find Kim Leach. Okay? So the very next morning, we sent out, that afternoon, we went out and scouted out the area. And we found several bodies of water there. And we picked out one very promising looking body of water and said, we're going to start here tomorrow. We're going to sweep around this body of water and see if we can find the body. And if we can't find it there, we're going to sweep around every other body of water. All kinds of water-filled sinkholes in this area. We're going to sweep around the other bodies of water and see if we can find the body. And that very first body of water that we swept around, we found Kim Leach. Okay? This is a little dirt road. The body of water is back in these woods. And you go up these woods, there's a little fence here, there's a fence post. You jump the fence, you walk just a few steps into the woods, and there, under that makeshift cover, was the body of Kim Leach. And not just the body of Kim Leach, but her clothing, and another treasure trove of evidence. Another treasure trove of evidence. So we got three main sources of tangible evidence here. We've got the van carpet, we've got the Volkswagen, the orange Volkswagen, and then we've got the crime scene, the clothing that's recovered from the crime scene. So we're ready to go. We're ready to go to trial. Well, how do you prepare a complex murder case? Well, there are 3 A's to preparing a complex murder case, or any kind of a case, really. You assimilate, assess, and assemble. Assimilate by learning the facts, learning the witnesses, and learning the tangible evidence. Okay? So what do we got for tangible evidence? We got the orange Volkswagen. We've got the dump site here. We've got the white van, and particularly in that white van, we've got this piece of carpet with the blood on it. There are 2 pairs of shoes from this orange Volkswagen that we find shoe tracks of both of these shoes in and on this van. There are 2 items of clothing taken out of this orange Volkswagen, a blue blazer and a torn shirt. That fibers from both of these, both the blazer and the shirt, are found on the van carpet. Fibers from both the blazer and the torn shirt are found on the clothing in the van. I mean, not in the van. Are found on the clothing at the dump site. Fiber from the clothing at the site is on the van carpet. Okay? Also, blood of the same type as Kim Leach's blood, which is determined from the body that was at the scene, is found on the van carpet. And in that day and age, all we could do at that time was ABO typing and a few enzymes. And no such thing, well, there was such thing as DNA, but there's no such thing as DNA testing. Okay? Now, all sorts of fibers from the van carpet were on Kim's clothing under the shed. Okay? So we basically got just what I like to call a kind of a perfect storm of evidence going round and round that ties up Ted Bundy as a perpetrator of this crime. Okay, assess. All right, what do we got? What does it mean? We formulate, test, and revise hypotheses. And I talked about formulating some hypotheses and testing them out, see what they were like already, see how they worked out already. We utilize analytical tools. There are a number of analytical tools that you use to try to come to grips with a large mass of evidence. We're going to talk specifically about those in just a minute. Then you settle on a case theory. You better have a case theory if you're going to court. If you don't have a case theory, you are in trouble, okay? What's a case theory? A case theory is a clear, concise statement of the facts that shows the defendant's guilty. I teach my class that that the case theory ought to be 100 words or less, and the words ought to be of 1 or 2 syllables. Very, lucid, brief, and worthy of belief is the quality of a case theory. Lucid, brief, and worthy of belief. Okay? And if you can't boil a case theory down into a statement of that nature, then you need to do some more thinking. Okay, analytical tools. What kind of analytical tools do you use? Well, there are any number of analytical tools you can use. You can use a narrative, a timeline, outline, charts and tables, and depending on what kind of case you have, one or more of these might be appropriate. Okay, in the Bundy case, we used all of them. Used all the analytical tools, and we used a number of different charts and tables to try to wrap our minds around how all the evidence went together. Okay, a narrative. Here's page 1 of the narrative. Okay, for those of you who were born in the computer generation, this is typewriter type. Okay, and this is done with the latest in technology at that time. That was called an electric typewriter. Okay, and a narrative that's just once upon a time, and tell the story of what happened. Okay. And when I got through with the narrative, I think it's about 100 and some pages long. Okay. All right, timeline. Here's a timeline for the day, right around the time of the kidnapping of Kim. It was done by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Okay, after Bundy's execution, the FBI did an analysis of Bundy's entire life from birth to death and tried to figure out every place he'd ever been and built a timeline, and this was to aid and assist in helping to solve unsolved homicides. Okay, a very detailed timeline and much more professional than this. Okay, much better looking. This is the portion of the FBI timeline that covers the day that Bundy kidnapped Kim. Okay, outline. Okay, here's the outline we used. Under 13 headings, disappearance from school, A, B, C, D, E, F, all of the witnesses, and this is an abbreviated outline, all of the witnesses who could testify about disappearance from school, and a synopsis of what they could say, and then all of the evidence, tangible evidence that went with the disappearance from the school, and a synopsis of its relevance. And the discovery of the body, crime scene, the autopsy, his use of credit cards at Lake City Gulf Station, the night he spent at Lake City Holiday Inn, credit card thefts, his theft of the van, the 13D11300 van, Parliamentary incident, his arrest in Pensacola, Blue Blazer. We had a specific outline heading for his Blue Blazer because when he was arrested, the Blue Blazer was in the orange Volkswagen, and he had to wear something to go to court, right? So they gave him the Blue Blazer. And so he wore that blue blazer that he wore the day he kidnapped Kim to court. Every time he went to court, he wore that blue blazer. And Lynn Henson, the fiber analyst, kept saying to us, I'm getting all kinds of blue fiber here. It looks like it come from a coat. If he got any kind of a coat. I said, yeah, he's wearing a daggum blue coat to court. I said, Bob, can we get that coat from him? I said, well, he's a prisoner. I think you just walk up to him and take the coat away from him. Okay? But before we do anything rash, let me do a little bit of research on this and I'll get back with you. The coat's not going anywhere. So I started to do research, and while I was doing the research, Ted Bundy's girlfriend walks into the FDLE field office and wants to tell somebody there how innocent Bundy is. And Jim Skipper, Special Agent Jim Skipper, he sat down, he listened to her for about 45 minutes and got through listening to her dissertation on how innocent Bundy was. And she got up and walked out and she said, oh, by the way, he said, Ted gave me his blue coat to take to the dry cleaner because you recommend a dry cleaner. And he said, yes, I can. And he told her, I think, the Big B on Tennessee Avenue. And she said, okay, thank you. So he waited a little while, give her time to get to the Big B. And then he went to the Big B, walked in, and asked the guy behind the counter, he said, did a woman just bring a blue coat in here? And the man behind the counter said, yep, sure did. And he said, okay, don't do anything with that coat. I'm going to be back here in just a few minutes with a search warrant. So they went and got a search warrant, came back, got the coat. And that's how we got the coat. And then they called me up and said, you can stop researching now, Bob. We got it. Okay. And so we had 13 sections here in an outline, and those 13 sections in the outline became 13 proof modules for the presentation of the case. Okay? So as you're wrapping your mind around the case and trying to understand it, you're also getting the case in a position that you can put the evidence on. Okay? Charts and tables. Lynn Henson had so daggone many fibers from so many different places, she had to figure out a way to understand what it all meant. So she drew a chart like this, and right up here, in this little box here, she put the van carpet, all the fibers from the van carpet. Green polypropylene, blue polypropylene, turquoise polypropylene, black polypropylene. Okay, in this box right here, she put all the fibers from Kim's clothing. Okay, this box right here, she put all the fibers from Bundy's clothing. Now, in this space up here, she's going to list the transfers from the van carpet to Kim's clothing and to Bundy's clothing. Okay, right here on this side, she's going to list the transfers from Kim's clothing to the van carpet. And right here, she's going to list the transfers from Bundy's clothing to Kim's clothing and the van carpet. Okay? And when she gets the chart all done, looks like this. Okay? Now, you notice there's nothing here. There's no transfers from any of this to Bundy's clothing. But the explanation for that is we're a long distance in time away from the crime, and he's had time to have these things cleaned. Okay? All right. So now that helps her understand the significance of the fiber evidence. It not only helps her understand the significance of the fiber evidence, hey, that helped the jury understand the significance of the fiber evidence too. And so Lynn made a chart for the jury, and she built the chart for the jury right there in the courtroom. And the original chart, they don't have any real good pictures of it, so I recreated it a little bit easier to see here. Started off a completely empty chart, and then as she talked about what her analysis of each item of clothing, and she'd place on the chart the various symbols for the type of fiber that was on that item of clothing. And then she put in all of the fiber transfers, all across the top, down the side, across the bottom. And when you got it filled up, it looked like this. And the jury was impressed. Okay, the jury was impressed. Whenever I was trying a case, I haven't tried one in 10 years, and probably never going to try one ever again. But whenever I was trying a case, I used to always try to do a reality check. The last person that knows how you do in a case is the lawyer who's trying the case. And some of my favorite people to do reality checks with were bailiffs. And there was a bailiff there, Alex. And every day, at the end of the day, you go to Alex and ask him, Alex, how are we doing? And first day, Alex, how are we doing? He said, you ain't showed me nothing yet. Okay, well, thanks for the encouragement. Alex, how we doing? You ain't showed me nothing yet. Okay, second week, Alex, how we doing? You ain't showed me nothing yet. Okay, third week, Alex, we're about to get to the end of this thing. How we doing? You ain't showed me nothing yet. We start putting on the scientific evidence. Alex, how we doing? Well, you're doing a little better. And then we put on Lynn Henson's testimony, and she built the chart for the jury. Right there in the courtroom, and the jury, they leaned forward and peered hard and listened. And we took a break right after Lynn testified, and I couldn't wait till the end of the day. I went over and said, Alex, how we doing? He said, you're over the top. Okay? So that's how powerful that was as an analytic tool to understand and as a demonstrative tool to help the jury understand the significance of the evidence. And our court reporter was somewhat of a cartoonist, and any significant event during the trial, she drew a cartoon of it. And this is a cartoon she drew of that. I omitted a cartoon that she drew of me tripping over the court reporter's stenotype machine. But it was that was a good day. I really enjoyed that day. I felt good. Okay, a symbol. You want to decide on what are the ultimate facts that I need to prove. What's the ultimate fact that I need to prove? Okay, I got it. Now, what are the secondary facts that I need to prove in order to prove the ultimate fact? Or the intermediate facts. Okay? All right? I prove the intermediate facts, I prove the ultimate fact. So we design a proof of these intermediate facts, and we have proved the ultimate fact. Okay, here's the ultimate fact from the Bundy case. Very simple. Bundy killed Kim. That's all we got to do. We don't have to prove anything other than Bundy killed Kim. The judge is going to give all kinds of instructions on all kinds of things about premeditation and this and that and the other. But if we prove Bundy killed Kim, that don't matter anything else. The jury's going to convict him. Okay, so how do we going to prove Bundy killed Kim? What are the intermediate facts that Bundy killed Kim? Okay, number one, we got to put Bundy in the van. Number two, we got to put Kim in the van. Number three, we got to put them together. We don't have to have anybody that saw Bundy kill Kim. All we got to do is prove those three things, and we have proved that Bundy killed Kim by circumstantial evidence. So how are we going to do this? Well, used another analytic chart. Got out a piece of paper, drew some boxes, drew 3 boxes, put Bundy's name in one box, put Kim's name in another box, put DeVan in another box, and I drew some lines from Bundy to Kim, drew some lines from Bundy to the van, and from Kim to the van. And on those lines, I put in the items of evidence that tied Bundy to the van along this leg of the triangle, tied Kim to the van along this leg of the triangle, tied Kim to Bundy along that leg of the triangle, okay? And kind of refined them down to 12 points on each leg of the triangle. Took it, showed it to the boss. Said, here's the explanation. This is how the case works. And he said, okay, great, that's great. He said, that'd make a good demonstrative aid for arguing this case to the jury. And I said, okay, great. I'll get a great big old poster and some pens and some magic markers, and I'll make this thing up around. He said, well, I think we can do better than that. Okay? So here's how, at the end of the 20th century, this case would be argued. Okay? We've got the van here. We've got Bundy here. We've got Kim here. What evidence do we have that connects these people together? These things together. What connects Bundy to the van? Well, the 13D11300 tag was stolen near his apartment. 13D11300 tag was on that van, stolen near his apartment. The van was stolen and recovered near his apartment. He buys gas in Lake City driving this van with a 13D11300 tag on it. He buys gas in Jacksonville driving a 13D11300 tag on the van. Okay? He buys that giant buck knife in Jacksonville, and the price tag from that knife is found on the floorboard of the van. Danny and Leslie Parmenter saw him in the van at Jeb Stuart High School. Andy Anderson, Clinch Edenfield, and Jackie Moore saw him in the van in Lake City. He was arrested in a Volkswagen that was stolen not 2 blocks from where the van was recovered. 2 shoe tracks in the van match his Adidas tennis shoes. Oh, just an aside, the defense subpoenaed a guy from the Adidas factory to come down and testify about the shoes, and he told everybody in the courtroom that you didn't pronounce it Adidas, it was Adidas. And I've never heard anybody pronounce it like that ever again. But just in case, just so you know, it's Adidas, it's not Adidas. Okay, anyway, the shoe track on the van bumper matches defendant's Bass Weegan shoes. Fibers on the van carpet match his blue blazer. Red fiber pills on the van carpet match red fiber pills on his burgundy shirt. Bundy was in the van. Okay, what evidence do we have that Kim was in the van? Well, Andy Anderson saw Kim being put in the van. Fibers on Kim's jeans match fibers from the van carpet. Blue and white fibers on the van carpet match Kim's jeans. 6 colors of fibers on the van carpet match her purse. White fibers on the van carpet match Kim's fur collar. White fibers on the van carpet match her socks. Blue nylon loops on the van carpet match her jersey. Fibers on Kim's purse match the van carpet. Fibers on her bra match the van carpet. Fibers on her socks match the van carpet. Fibers on Kim's jersey matched the van carpet. Blood stains on the van carpet matched Kim's blood type. Oh, if we just had DNA back in those days. Okay? So what does this tell us? Kim was in the van. So what evidence do we have that they were together? Well, defendant buys gas in Lake City on February the 7th. He spends the night in Lake City just 2 miles away from the junior high on February the 8th. Clinch Edenfield sees him at the junior high on February the 9th. Andy Anderson sees Bundy putting Kim in the van at the junior high school on February the 9th. Green fibers on her socks match Bundy's burgundy shirt. Burgundy fibers on her socks match Bundy's burgundy shirt. Blue polyester fibers on her socks match Bundy's blue blazer. Blue wool fibers on her socks match Bundy's blue blazer. Blue wool fibers on her jeans match Bundy's blue blazer. Blue polyester fibers on her jeans match Bundy's blue blazer. Semen stains on Kim's panties matches Bundy's blood type. All we had was ABO typing back in those days. This would be a slam dunk case today with DNA. But DNA was just a few years in the future. 12, the Parmenter incident at Jeb Stuart Junior High School, where he tried to kidnap a girl who could have been Kim's twin sister. All of that tells us that Bundy and Kim were together. Okay, now, if Bundy was in the van and Kim was in the van and Bundy and Kim were together, then there's but one conclusion that we can draw. Bundy killed Kim. And it was premeditated, and that's murder in the first degree. And there's a kidnapping, and that's murder in the first degree. And that's the verdict that I ask you to return. Okay. Now, I put this on at a National College of District Attorney Schools several years ago. It was a trial advocacy school, and they wanted all of the instructors to give it a sample closing on the final argument. And so I gave this. I put that together and gave that. And students asked, well, did he have PowerPoint back in 1980? I said, no, it didn't have PowerPoint back in 1980. Okay, with a little bit less high tech back in 1980. Here's what it looked like back in 1980. Okay, had a great big poster board, and we had all 12 points on the chart here. And the guy that made this for us was a graphic artist, and that looks a whole heck of a lot better than what I'd have done with a poster board and magic markers, I assure you. Made little white strips of paper with some tacky stuff on them, put over each point. And he told us what you do with this is you do a strip tease. And he didn't mean take your clothes off. He meant as you cover each point, you uncover. As you make each point, you uncover. The reason you do that is if you just show them the chart with all 36 of the points showing, while you're over here talking about point 1, about half of jurors are up here reading these points, and the other half are down here reading those points, and nobody's listening to you. So you keep their attention by disclosing the points one by one. Go down this leg with 12 points. Go down this leg with the 12 points. And then go across here with the 12 points. Okay. The longest final argument I ever gave in my life was this case right here because it deserved a long final argument. It had to put a lot of evidence together. And the jury was tired by the time I got to the closing. And I was afraid I was losing them. And I unveiled the chart here. And they all sat up, and they all leaned forward, and they all listened intently. I said, oh boy, this is good. They are listening, okay? And this is what it looked like in court. Now, I don't know who that skinny, dark-haired fellow is there. But I could have sworn it was me. My recollection is that it was me, okay? And I guarantee you these people right here were listening. They were eating it up. And I'm not 100% proud of one thing that I did during this argument, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. See these right here? Those are the paper strips. And we talked about this, we planned it. And I said, well, what if the defense attorney gets up and he speaks to each point and says, well, this doesn't make any difference, and then puts the strips back up. And when he gets through, all the points are covered up. And I said, well, we got to keep him from doing that, right? So, as I took the strips off, I took them, I folded them up, and put them in his hand right here, okay? When I got through, I had 36 strips of paper right here in my hand. And it was time to go sit down. So I took this hand, and I grabbed the strips like this, and I twisted them just as hard as I could. And then I wadded them up just as small a ball as I could until I was absolutely sure they could not possibly be used to be put back on the chart. Walked over to the garbage can in the corner of the courtroom, dropped the strips in the garbage can, went over and sat down. And when I sat down, Bundy learned how to whisper in the sawmill. And you could hear him talking to his lawyers. And as I sat down, I heard Bundy speak to the defense attorney, Vic Africana, and he says, get up and tear that chart up. And for some strange reason, I forgot to take the chart down. I left it up there. And so the first thing that Vic did, the defense attorney, he got up, he walked over the chart, he took it down off the easel, he walked over to the far wall, turned the chart, face to the wall, set it down, turned around, walked back, and he delivered his final argument without ever mentioning the chart, okay? Which I thought was great. That meant he had no answer for it, okay? And, of course, the clerk had to immortalize that with a cartoon. Jury went out, they stayed out 8 hours. It got late the first night. They said they were tired and wanted to go back to the hotel room, and they'd come back next morning. They'd been out about 4 hours at that time, 4 or 5 hours. And the judge had let them, he said, you got so much evidence we can't put it all in the jury room with you. And he'd let them deliberate in the courtroom. And so we went back into the courtroom for them to be dismissed, and saw they'd taken the counsel tables and they'd pushed them together, and they'd gone over to the evidence that the clerk had neatly arranged in numerical order, all 200 some odd exhibits, and they had ripped that evidence up one side and down the other, rearranged it. They spread it out. They put rearranged the evidence in order that they wanted to look at it, and you could see how they had arranged the evidence on the table. The clerk was not happy because she's going to have to put all that stuff back together, but I was ecstatic because they were looking at the evidence, they were studying the evidence, they were going through it, and there was one way that all that evidence would go together, and the one way that evidence would go together would be that Bundy was guilty. Okay? So the next day, they deliberated a few more hours, and the clerk immortalized the jury verdict. You notice the foreperson down here delivering up the verdict. The gentleman's name was Patrick Walski. And during voir dire, the minute we saw him walk in through the door, everybody on the prosecution team fell in love with him, and everybody on the defense team hated him. But they returned a verdict of guilty, murder in the first degree, guilty of kidnapping. But that's kind of throwaway. Okay, so we're done, right? We're through. We won. No. Okay, when you're seeking the death penalty, you get a verdict of guilty as charged, you're not done. Come back 2 days later, February the 9th, we got an advisory sentence recommending the death penalty. February the 9th. Does that date ring a bell? Second anniversary of Kim's kidnapping. The defense team was not happy that the judge set the sentencing hearing on that day. Okay, now we've won, right? We got the jury recommendation. Judge sentenced him to death. Case is over, right? Wrong. If you're seeking the death penalty, you don't win by getting a guilty verdict. You don't win by getting a jury recommendation. You don't win by getting a judge sentencing to death. You don't even win by getting a death warrant. You don't even win by getting a death warrant. You win that case when the defendant is led into the death chamber and he is executed. And you are in for a long haul getting from the crime scene to the death chamber. It is it's not a very pleasant path, and you're invested in it all the way through. Okay. When they started performing executions, they asked me, "Would you like to go see an execution?" And I said, "No, I'm not interested in seeing any execution on anybody except somebody I put on death row." Okay? Because seeing an execution is not something that is something to check off your bucket list. Seeing the execution, in my mind, is seeing the job through to the end. Seeing the job through to the end. The job's not over until the doctor steps back from the body in the death chamber and pronounces the defendant dead. Okay, and on January the 24th, 1989, the death sentence was carried out on Ted Bundy. And the case was over, and we had won.